Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video is going to be a tribute to my New York City and Greater Manhattan audience, including the Bronx and Yonkers, Queens, and Long Island. Alright, because I've been focused on West Coast matters, Alta California, a military complex developed by the Spanish and Franciscan priest, Father Junipero Serra. And California has never looked back from the 1700s until 2023, where I have chemtrails being dumped on me on a daily basis. So pardon me if I seem a little flustered. I have been subjected to a morning of low-flying, obnoxiously loud, clandestine service military planes at a low altitude coordinating the military jets probably at 20 to 25,000 feet above my city. And they are conducting their usual daily destruction of our weather as well as dumping toxic waste on our city. So in order to distract me, I thought I'd head back to Manhattan, New York and see what felonious crimes I can dig up. And of course, as you know, there's no shortage of felony murders in the greater New York City area. So today's video will be entitled Dr. Albert A. LaVerne. Dr. Albert LaVerne was a medical doctor, psychiatrist operating out of New York, in New York City specifically. He had privileges at Bellevue State Hospital, and he testified as an expert witness in many murder cases, as he portrayed himself as an expert of the criminally insane, sort of his moniker, in my opinion. Dr. Albert LaVerne also had teaching privileges at Fordham University in the Bronx. That's right, I said the Bronx. That is a Jesuit, parochial, Roman Catholic institution in the Bronx. And the Bronx, of course, is famous, as you know, because many clandestine service CIA warriors came out of there. Just to name a few, Jerome Kohlberg, who's Jewish, and he's from New Rochelle, New York, which is adjacent to the Bronx. He became a prominent private clandestine service banker on Sand Hill Road and founded KKR, along with his two Bear Stearns cohorts who were younger than him, Henry Kravitz and George Roberts. So George Roberts, Henry Kravitz, and Jerome Kohlberg founded KKR at 2800 Sand Hill Road in 1976, at 2800 Sand Hill Road. And it was their firm who last saw Aaron Valente alive at 2500 Sand Hill Road, just down the hill from where Jerome Kohlberg's office was. And she went missing for 5 days until she appeared dead as a doornail in the back of her upscale Nissan Murano SUV on Bowes Lane, just 5 houses up from Diablo Lane. That's right, I said Diablo Lane. The corner of Diablo Lane and Bowes Lane was in close proximity to where Aaron Valente's dead body was found in the rear seat of her rent-a-car. She wasn't in the driver's seat, she was in the passenger seat in the back. Anyway, I find it more than just a coincidence that Jerome Kohlberg from New Rochelle, New York, would be the founder of the firm that last saw Aaron Valente alive. And that's what makes the Bronx so special. It's also home to Don Valentine, who also attended Fordham University as a student, graduated there, and then went on to found a premier clandestine service private bank called Sequoia Capital, located at, guess what, the exact same address as Jerome Kohlberg, 2800 Sand Hill Road. And Don Valentine got there first in 1972, and he opened his office simultaneously with Eugene Kleiner opening Kleiner Perkins private clandestine service bank at 2750 Sand Hill Road. So the reason that the trail of corn always leads to the Bronx or to Manhattan, because Eugene Kleiner came from Manhattan vis-a-vis Vienna, Austria, where he fled the Nazis in the late 1930s, because guess what? He's Jewish. And Jerome Kohlberg is Jewish. And guess what? Dr. Albert LaVerne, psychiatrist of New York, he's Jewish. Guess who else came out of the Bronx? Sidney Gottlieb. You know, the person who was put in charge of CIA MK Ultra in 1952-53. Sidney Gottlieb was born and raised in the Bronx. Now, he has a PhD in chemical engineering from Caltech, which is in Pasadena, California, if you didn't know. So here's another guy that loaded up the truck and moved to Beverly, Pasadena, that is, home to Jet Propulsion Lab, a.k.a. Jack Parsons Lab, a.k.a. Church of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. That's where Church of Scientology in America was founded, was in Pasadena. Then it moved to Florida, and L. Ron Hubbard came out of the Navy and appears to be Navy intelligence. He didn't create the Church of Scientology. I believe that was created by Anton LaVey in London, England. But anyway, let's just say that L. Ron Hubbard got the American franchise for auditing your brain if you want to join, auditing your brain for a fee to be a member of the Church of Scientology. And this is where Sidney Gottlieb spent his PhD doctorate time. And right there, right where the Church of Scientology was formatted, right where the Jack Parsons Lab and the rockets for the Saturn program were created, right there in Arroyo Creek beds, near the Rose Bowl. That's where Caltech is located. Guess who else came out of the Bronx? Peter Falk, a Jewish man who played an Italian his whole life. Alan Alda, who is not Jewish. Alan Alda is Italian and Irish, and he was born and raised in the Bronx. Mark Levin Lane, his real name is Levin. He's Jewish and he's from the Bronx, but he changed his name to Lane so that you'd believe his poppycock stories about John Kennedy and his little documentary films that he produced, where he concealed the fact that Dallas is a port city and that the kill shot came from the railroad tracks, which are part of the port facility, and blew John Kennedy's brains out. And Mark Levin Lane came from the Bronx. Later, he went on to become personal friends and lawyers for Jim Jones of the People's Temple Agricultural Product, rebranded by the media as Jonestown. And everybody got killed except the paramilitary guards and Mark Levin Lane, who got flown out of there safe as can be, sent to Paris, I think, to go to Geneva, Switzerland, to make some cash deposits. Geneva, Switzerland, home to the Red Cross, home to the World Health Organization, home to the United Nations for continental Europe, home to Loch Lomond, home to CERN, the Department of Energy diabolical secret program. That's too many clandestine service activities in one banking hub known as Geneva, Switzerland, Lake Leman, the world. And one wonders if they have an underground facility under that lake. I've heard rumors. Anyway, Samuel Untermeyer, who's a Jewish jeweler turned lawyer in New York, he is buried in the Bronx. He wasn't raised in the Bronx, but he's interred at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. Samuel Untermeyer, you may remember Untermeyer Park and Gardens in Yonkers. That comes into the story because guess what? Dr. Albert LaVerne was assigned a 5,000 square foot mansion that bordered Untermeyer Park and Gardens in Yonkers. Right around the time that David Berkowitz was conducting his nocturnal shootings of innocent people. Remember David Berkowitz? Not his real name. You know that David Berkowitz's real name is Richard David Falco. Richard David Falco. His father was Italian. His mother was Jewish. His mother was an unemployed Jewish waitress. And she gave David Berkowitz up. Well, Richard David Falco is what's on his birth certificate. And she gave up her child 3 or 4 days after birth because her new boyfriend, who's married, didn't want a child. Are you following me? So Richard David Falco was eventually adopted by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, and they were his adopted parents, and that's how you got the Berkowitz name into Falco. So Falco was switched out for Berkowitz upon his adoption to Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz. And guess what? They're from the Bronx. Can't make this up. And just so you know how unprofessional the Son of Sam murders were, it seems to be a little confused as to how many victims there were, but somewhere between 13 and 17 people were stabbed or shot. There were 2 stabbings and the rest were shootings. So depending on which report you want to believe, I tend to believe none of them. But 6 people were murdered by the Son of Sam killer, allegedly. However, between 7 and 11 were injured but didn't die. One, I think, was a paraplegic. But what I'm trying to tell you is that there were a grand total of about maximum 17 victims, of which 6 died. Now, how does that compare to the Zodiac killer? Well, their numbers are bigger, but in the Zodiac you had 7 victims and 5 died. But I'm here to tell you, in my professional opinion, there were a number of killers involved with what was labeled by the media as Zodiac, but weren't Zodiac killings. They were killings, and then they were rebranded as Zodiac at a later date. Just like the Sharon Tate murders were branded as the Manson cult family murders 4 months after everybody got buried and interred. So in other words, it wasn't at all obvious that Charlie Manson, whose name is Maddox, was involved in the case whatsoever. And you do know that Susan Atkins and Patricia Krenwinkel and Charlie Miles Maddox were arrested exactly 1 week after Sharon Tate was murdered. They were arrested at the Spawn Ranch at sunup, around 6:15 a.m. Saturday morning, 1 week after the Sharon Tate murder. Charlie Manson, I hate using that fake name, and Susan Atkins, Sadie, and Patricia Krenwinkel, I forgot her CIA name. Anyway, they were arrested, and they were booked into the Los Angeles County Jail, and they were fingerprinted and photographed, and then on Monday morning they were released. No arraignment. They were allegedly arrested because of suspicion of grand theft auto regarding dune buggies that were allegedly found on the movie set known as the George Spawn Ranch, which is in the porn center of San Fernando Valley, if you didn't know. I believe all of those people, there were 21 people arrested that morning. I believe they were all bussed over, around 5:30 a.m. and then sat around until somebody decided that the sun was coming up and let's do a raid with 100 law enforcement officers, California Highway Patrol, the Los Angeles County Sheriff, and the Los Angeles Municipal Police, which are completely out of their zip code. Anyway, in other words, we had a bunch of fake policemen conducting a fake arrest with lots of photographers around to document it 1 week after the Sharon Tate murder. So clearly, law enforcement didn't think that anybody who they arrested that Saturday morning had anything whatsoever to do with the murders in Benedict Canyon and in Silver Lake, aka Los Feliz, Griffith Park area of the La Biancas. You see, people, this is the meta-universe. In other words, people get whacked, people get killed, sometimes months go by, and then a cover story is sent out about what happened. But there are no actual investigations that lead to any of the scapegoats. The scapegoats are just declared in the media, and then they're lambasted, roasted, and French fried in a fake trial. All right, getting back to Dr. Albert LaVerne. He was, I believe, clandestine service sponsored and supported. There is no way this knucklehead could make a living being a psychiatrist and having a 13-room office in East Side Manhattan, Midtown. You have any idea what that would cost? And this knucklehead is doing work for the criminally insane at Bellevue State Hospital, which is in Kips Bay. if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that the Kips Bay near Roosevelt Island, East River, where the complex known as Bellevue State Medical Center is located? Yeah, I believe it's Kips Bay. Anyway, it's above Lower East Side, and it's sort of southern Midtown. It's 15 blocks from where John Lennon resided with his girlfriend, Mi Pang. They lived 15 blocks. They were closer to Roosevelt Island, and I believe Bellevue State Hospital is 15 blocks south of Roosevelt Island, the tip of it. Albert LaVerne appeared in the national news 6 times, mostly for the wrong reasons, but it started out well. You should know that the first injection of Albert LaVerne into the mainstream media was during the 1950s, when he pioneered a breakthrough treatment for people who had addictions. It was called carbon monoxide treatments. This is where you take a person that's addicted to smoking or addicted to alcohol or some compulsion, and you strap them down to a gurney, and then you put a gas mask over their face full of carbon monoxide. And then you wait until they pass out into a comatose state. Then you remove the gas mask and replace it with pure oxygen gas mask, and you resuscitate this victim that you've just comatized. And then after rinse and repeating this process a number of times, according to Dr. Albert LaVerne, who I believe is a quack doctor, he said 48 out of 50 patients that he conducted carbon monoxide treatments on showed dramatic improvements to cure their addiction. He even got a United States congressman to endorse his concept. So this was how Dr. LaVerne was injected into the meta-universe known as Greater New York City. Here we have a psychiatrist who believes in carbon monoxide treatment. By the way, he also believes in electroshock treatments, but he wasn't in the news for that. Privately, he was all about electroshock treatments. If you don't believe me, just go hang out at Bellevue State Hospital and ask about electroshock treatments. Anyway, the second time Dr. Albert LaVerne was injected into the lexicon of our world was January 21st, 1957, upon the arrest of the Mad Bomber of New York, who terrorized New York for over 16 years, sometimes known as the Brooklyn Bomber, the Subway Bomber. George Peter Metesky. George Metesky was arrested on January 21st, 1957. He had allegedly planted 33 bombs, of which 22 exploded, and claimed 15 victims who were injured but didn't die. So the Mad Bomber of New York began terrorizing New York before Pearl Harbor. In the 1940s, bombs were found throughout New York, like Grand Central Station, like the subway system, in various parks in and around Greater New York. And nobody got killed, but it was really a ginned up fear porn from the media that we got a crazy mad bomber on the loose. And he wasn't caught for 16 years. But on January 21st, 1957, the police arrested him. Now, they didn't exactly arraign him, they indicted him. So he was subject to a grand jury hearing, which of course you can indict a ham sandwich with a grand jury. So I guess the case against the Mad Bomber wasn't particularly strong. They never actually found any bombs when they searched his home, but they claimed to have found bits and pieces of things that could be a bomb. So it wasn't a particularly strong case. It doesn't really matter. He was indicted for attempted murder. They charged him, I think, with 33 counts because they found 33 bombs. And Dr. Albert LaVerne got to examine George Metesky at, guess where? Bellevue State Hospital for the criminally insane. And he testified at the trial for George Metesky to make damn sure he got convicted, except that he was judged criminally insane, so he was sent to Matawan State Hospital in Beacon, New York. That's important because that's going to come back in the story in a moment. Okay, so that's the second time that Dr. Albert LaVerne was presented to us in the national media, was because of his expert testimony regarding the Mad Bomber of New York, and he got him assigned to the criminally insane state prison of Matawan in Beacon, New York. And he's also known for carbon monoxide treatments. Last I checked, that's how you kill yourself, but whatever. What do I know? I'm not a MK Ultra psychiatrist. Okay, the third news story nationally presented that involves Dr. Albert LaVerne, and we didn't know the backstory on this, but we found out later, is that it was a Wednesday afternoon, and Dr. Albert LaVerne's beautiful wife, Paula Passavant LaVerne, her actual name, she's born in Paris, Paula Germaine Janine Passavant, from Paris, 27 years old, the mother of 3, a small infant in a stroller and 2 toddlers, and she's just returning from a walk in Central Park to her upscale apartment on 5th Avenue, right across from the park. So you know this is an expensive apartment, and she strolls the stroller into the lobby of her 5th Avenue apartment. I used to have the address, I've lost it. Whereupon she meets a 26-year-old woman by the name of Ann Kiernan, who calls out her name at the elevator, and Paule Passavant responds yes. Whereupon Ann Kiernan empties a .38 caliber pistol into Paule Passavant's head, murdering her in front of her 3 children, one of whom's in a stroller, in front of the elevator, in this upscale lobby of an apartment building across from Central Park on 5th Avenue. This occurs on August 30th, 1961. That's a Wednesday afternoon. Okay? So, what's the motive there, right? Well, let me tell you something. As you dig into that case, you will find that 4 years earlier, Ann Kiernan was a school teacher at the time. She was living in New Jersey at the time. She was living in Mountain Lake, New Jersey at the time of this murder of Dr. LaVerne's wife, Paula Passavant. You know, if you looked at Paula Passavant's parents, you'll find a treasure trove of information, and how she could possibly marry an older man, a Jewish gentleman by the name of Albert LaVerne, is very confusing to me. She was 27, and I believe that Albert LaVerne was about 41 years old at the time of the murder of his younger wife. And remember, he's caught up with the Mad Bomber and his carbon monoxide treatments and electroshock treatments of innocent people over at Bellevue Hospital. Why does he have time for 3 children and a wife? Anyway, she's murdered, so she's out of the picture now. Then we find out that Ann Kiernan attended Fordham University, and she took a sociology class. And guess who her professor was at Fordham University? None other than Dr. Albert LaVerne, who was a sociology, anthropology teacher at Fordham University. And he poaches his students for experimental treatments. And he even convinced Ann Kiernan to volunteer for a special experiment where he took her to none other than Bellevue State Hospital, locked her in a windowless cell, and performed, I'm told, 19 electroshock treatments upon Ann Kiernan, who was in her early 20s and a student at Fordham University. So here you have a college professor performing electroshock treatment on a student of a university. Do you see how diabolical Fordham University is? I mean, no wonder Andrew Cuomo graduated from there. No wonder Chris Cuomo attended there before he went to Yale, because this is a place for nutcases. This is why Don Valentine was a premier banker before he died 13 days after Aaron Valente's body was found. Because sociopaths come out of Fordham University. Obviously. All right, so Ann Kiernan is convicted of murdering Paula Passavant in cold blood, but is judged criminally insane. And guess what? She's sentenced to Mattawan State Hospital for the criminally insane in Beacon, New York. You know, with the Mad Bomber. I don't know how many inmates were up there at the time. Probably around 500. Anyway, Mad Bomber is up there, and Ann Kiernan is up there. Now, because I researched so many cases, people of New York, you should know the name Kernan is not an unusual name at all, because guess what? On January 24th, 1975, a James Kernan, just one letter different, Kernan instead of Kernan, K-I-E-R-M-A-N instead of K-I-R-N-A-N. He's murdered in cold blood with Barbara Colby, not William Colby's wife, because William Colby had two wives. His first wife was Barbara Colby. Not her. I'm talking about the actress who appeared with Columbo in Murder by the Book. She's shot in cold blood along with her boyfriend, James Kernan, in Culver City. What's the chance that Paula Passavant LaVerne is killed by Ann Kiernan, and then James Kernan is murdered 14 years later in Culver City by an assailant who was never caught? I don't know. The CIA does not have any imagination. They reuse, rinse and repeat names, places, and methods over and over again. Just like the airplanes above me. These are the same friggin' airplanes every day. The pilot planes, the scout planes, the ones that are measuring the toxic levels, they're out there every day, giving me a splitting headache. Anyway, so I'm running out of nationally presented stories. The next one, I think that's 4. Remember, we had the carbon monoxide as a treatment of addiction. We had the Mad Bomber, expert witness testimony by Albert LaVerne. We had his wife, Paula Passavant, murdered in the lobby of their Fifth Avenue apartment. Then we have Lieutenant Calley, who is going to be blamed for the My Lai Massacre. And guess what? Here comes Dr. Albert LaVerne as an expert witness for the defense, and he examines, Second Lieutenant William Calley. When you read all the news articles about the My Lai court-martial, they will continuously refer to William Calley as a first lieutenant. BS. He was a second lieutenant, and I think barely for 40 days, okay? He was the junior officer. There were 9 officers in field, and he was the least senior of all of them, which is why he's the only one that was convicted. Because Captain Ernest Medina was acquitted, and there were over a dozen witnesses that claim he shot a unarmed woman twice in the face with his M16 rifle, and he was acquitted of murder. And his lawyer was F. Lee Bailey. F. Lee Bailey that represented Patricia Hearst, and F. Lee Bailey that represented O.J. Simpson and got him acquitted, and he got Ernest Medina acquitted. He got Patty Hearst convicted, and he got O.J. off, right? So he's a CIA attorney, and guess what? Albert LaVerne is a CIA psychiatrist, and he went on to testify in the defense of William Calley, and it's quite extraordinary. He said that he was not responsible for his actions because he was in a robotic trance, and he was following orders as he was programmed to do, and he was acting in a robotic trance. So I guess they had a secret meeting and decided to get rid of Dr. Albert LaVerne, who went off script, because the idea was to get William Calley convicted of murder, which they did. So I will post the link below, but Albert LaVerne was tossed off the My Lai Massacre case as being saved by the bell, I believe, the colonel who was in charge of the court-martial. You should know that the judge of the court-martial was very junior officer. He was definitely typical where it's a railroad case. You want to put in an inexperienced judge. Colonel Reed Kennedy was a complete novice. He was completely out of his element, should never have been assigned something like the My Lai Massacre. But because the whole idea was to cover it up and to acquit everyone except for the scapegoat, he was the perfect dumbass judge. Dr. Reed Kennedy, who went on to become a prominent lawyer in Marietta, Georgia, but he was completely used in the My Lai fake court-martial. The quote that I will use was that Dr. LaVerne testified that William Calley was in a virtual paralysis of will at My Lai. He was acting as a robot. MK Ultra Manchurian Candidate style would be my embellishment of the story. Don't forget there were 3 platoons that entered that hamlet, Song Mai and My Lai, which was in the Quang Gia province. And thank goodness for Hugh Thompson, who put an end to the killing. Otherwise, there would have been closer to 1,000 innocent people killed instead of the 504 who were killed. All right, and the final national presented news story involving Dr. Albert LaVerne was on the day that David Berkowitz was convicted of his 6 murders. By the way, second-degree murders. They were second. They were not premeditated first-degree murders. David Berkowitz was convicted of second-degree murder of 6 people, and he was sentenced to 6 terms of life with the possibility of parole in 25 years. And on that day, Dr. LaVerne's 5,000 square foot mansion in Yonkers, adjacent to Untermeyer Park, burned to the ground in a felony arson blaze. And weeks later, Dr. LaVerne was arrested and convicted of that arson. You should know that paradoxically, Dr. LaVerne was sleeping at his Midtown East Side Manhattan doctor's offices, 13-room offices, where he had a professional private clinic, which I don't see how he could possibly afford that unless the CIA was paying for that space. Anyway, so in other words, he wasn't staying in Yonkers when his house burned down, like maybe he knew something. Certainly it's a shorter commute to Bellevue State Hospital from Midtown Manhattan. But the point is that Dr. LaVerne was not home when his home burned to the ground in a professional way. Also, in the Son of Sam series by Manny Grossman and Eric Galati, they did find a witness who claims she went into Dr. LaVerne's home before it burned down and personally witnessed coffins in his living room. Coffins. One wonders what was in the basement of Dr. LaVerne's home, right? In Untermeyer Park. This girl was 13 years old when she claims to have seen coffins in Dr. LaVerne's living room. And he's a psychiatrist, and you know he knows Sidney Gottlieb, don't you? You betcha. All right, well, anyway, that's my story for today. Wanted to give my New York listeners and viewers an opportunity to know that we're not leaving you out. You're definitely part of this clandestine service Murder Most Foul program. It's definitely an assassination program, and we have a lot of disturbed people with medical doctor licenses, and I would be afraid of doctors of all types. They're state licensed, they're military controlled, they're Medicare paid or state paid or CIA clandestine service paid. You cannot trust these people. They're dangerous. They believe in electroshock treatment. They believe in carbon monoxide treatment to addiction. They believe in poppycock, and they believe in having coffins in their living rooms, and their wives end up getting shot in the head by Manchurian candidates in the lobby of their expensive apartments off Central Park on 5th Avenue. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Please hit the like and subscribe. Share my videos because I am most definitely shadow banned. Have a great day.